A big dig is getting underway in Poland in search of a mystery train filled with treasures buried at the end of World War II.
In the final days of World War II, as the Third Reich crumbled, the Nazis rushed to hide what they could not protect. Deep in Poland's Al Mountains, they carved massive tunnels under Project Riese, a project so secret that its true purpose has never been explained.
Project Riese means giant project, and it's one of the biggest mysteries of the Third Reich.
Witnesses later whispered that a train loaded with gold, stolen art, weapons, and even prisoners rolled into these hills and never came out.
According to legend, in the waning days of World War II, as the Soviet army closed in, Nazi soldiers filled the train with gold, gems, and other treasure.
The entrances were sealed, guards vanished, and records disappeared. 80 years later, the tunnels remain. When experts finally went inside, what they uncovered left the world in shock. Project Riese, the giant beneath the mountains. The year was 1943, and Nazi Germany was starting to lose the war. British and American bombers were pounding German cities into rubble night after night. Cologne, Hamburg, Berlin were all in flames. The Allied bombing campaign had reached a scale Hitler never anticipated, and it sent the Third Reich into panic. It was in this climate of destruction and fear that a new project was born that would consume entire mountains, vanish from official records, and leave behind one of the most disturbing mysteries of the war. It was called Project Riese, or Giant. The order came from the top. Hitler demanded the immediate construction of a vast underground complex in the Owl Mountains of Lower Silesia, a remote and rugged region near today's Polish-Czech border. His vision was clear. If the Reich could not survive above ground, it would survive below it. The surface could burn. But deep inside the mountains, the Third Reich would be untouchable, invisible, and possibly eternal. Albert Speer, Hitler's personal architect and Minister of Armaments, was tasked with making it real. Speer later admitted that Hitler had become obsessed with the idea of creating a hidden world underground. The project was planned on a scale never seen before in European military engineering. Construction began immediately in several locations across the Owl Mountains: Osowka, Włodarz, Rzeczka, Jugowice, and beyond. What emerged was shocking. Entire hillsides were tunneled out. Caverns were blasted deep into solid gneiss rock using explosives and high-pressure drills. In some places, the ceilings rose 12 meters high, tall enough to hold 4-story buildings. In others, concrete corridors ran straight into the earth with no known exit point. The total volume excavated is estimated to be hundreds of thousands of cubic meters, but no one can say for sure. Much of it remains sealed or unexplored to this day. The scale alone raised questions, but it was the design that truly disturbed engineers who studied it later. At Osowka, investigators found enormous concrete monoliths fitted with steel pipes and channels, but no explanation for their function. There were hydraulic structures, floodgates, and drainage systems that suggested the movement of vast amounts of water or chemicals. Some rooms had cable supports built into the ceilings, possibly meant to hang equipment. Others were structured like assembly halls, but what was to be assembled has never been determined. There were no signs that the tunnels were designed to support human life. There were no sleeping quarters, there were no kitchens, bathrooms, or food storage areas. There was nothing to suggest that anyone was meant to live underground for any extended period of time. Instead, the entire layout points to one thing. These tunnels were built to operate machines, store equipment, or carry out horrifying industrial processes. And yet, the project was never finished. By early 1945, Nazi Germany was collapsing. Soviet forces were pushing in from the east. Berlin was under siege, and there was no more time. Construction in the Owl Mountains stopped without warning. The Nazis sealed off tunnels with explosives. Some were flooded on purpose. Others were hidden and never marked again. No one gave an explanation. No final report was issued. Key documents disappeared. People connected to the project were either killed or vanished. The entire operation was buried in a rush, as if whatever had been planned inside had become too dangerous to complete and too secret to expose. Because no one knew the truth, speculation took over. People tried to fill the gaps. Some said it was a weapons facility. Others believed it was built for nuclear testing. But one rumor stood out from the rest. Some claimed that a Nazi train carrying gold had disappeared into one of the tunnels and was sealed inside before the Soviets arrived. Birth of the Gold Train legend. The rumor started in Silesian villages near Wrocław. Locals claimed they had seen a heavily guarded train leave the city as the Red Army advanced. It was not an ordinary transport. Witnesses described long lines of wagons covered with tarpaulins, soldiers stationed on every carriage, and orders shouted at gunpoint to clear the tracks. Then the train disappeared. No one ever saw it reach its destination. That single disappearance gave birth to one of the most chilling legends of the war, the Nazi Gold Train. The rumor spread quickly because of the chaos of the time. Breslau, now Wrocław, had been declared a fortress city. Its fall meant the collapse of Nazi control in the east. If anything valuable was to be saved, it had to be moved west before the Soviets arrived. People believed the Reichsbank's reserves, stolen art from across Europe, and even Hitler's personal files were loaded onto the train. The story only grew darker when people noticed that the Riese tunnels in the Alp Mountains were suddenly sealed. To frightened locals, it made perfect sense. The train had been hidden inside, buried before the Soviets could find it. Over time, the rumors multiplied. Gold and paintings were only the beginning. Some claimed the wagons carried toxic chemical agents, the kind the Nazis never dared to unleash in open battle. Others said the train held secret documents on nuclear experiments, information that had to be hidden at all costs. The strangest whispers involved crates of stolen relics, looted from churches and museums across occupied Europe, bound for occult research. The most disturbing version of all claimed prisoners had been locked inside the train to ensure silence. If true, the sealed tunnels were not only vaults of treasure, but tombs of the forgotten. Survivors later described hearing deep rumbling in the earth long after the tracks had gone silent, as if a train was still trapped below, endlessly moving in the dark. The Nazi Gold Train became part of the landscape of fear. It was not just a story of treasure, but a story of something hidden with brutal secrecy. And for decades, the legend waited in silence until one event in 2015 thrust it back into the light. The 2015 search. For decades, the Nazi Gold Train was dismissed as myth. Then, in August 2015, that myth roared back to life. Two men, Piotr Koper, a Polish builder, and Andreas Richter, a German amateur historian, held a press conference that electrified the world. Their claim was simple, but explosive. They had found it. According to them, the Nazi Gold Train was real, and it was buried near kilometer 65 of a rail line in Wałbrzych, just outside the Alp Mountains. Their tip, they said, came from a deathbed confession made by a man who had witnessed the train's disappearance during the war. The pair had used ground-penetrating radar to scan the area. What they found stunned them. The radar images showed a 100-meter-long anomaly underground. It was uniform in shape, rectangular, and lined up precisely along where old railway tracks once ran. They claimed the anomaly contained several large objects, spaced evenly, and surrounded by disturbed soil. To them, it looked like a line of buried train wagons. Within days, they submitted their discovery to local authorities. But it was the public release of one key image that triggered global hysteria. The radar scan showed what looked like a train-shaped outline, clear and unmistakable. News outlets around the world exploded with headlines. Speculation ranged from lost Reichsbank gold to missing. People started calling it Poland's Tutankhamun tomb, except this one, they joked grimly, might be filled with machine guns instead of mummies. Then came a moment that raised the stakes. Poland's Deputy Minister of Culture, Piotr Żuchowski, reviewed the radar image and made a statement that stunned even seasoned archaeologists. He said he was 99% certain that a Nazi train was buried at the site. This was not a fringe theory anymore. It was now a matter of national and international attention. The government took no chances. The Polish army was sent in to secure the site. Combat engineers swept the area for mines, traps, and unexploded ordnance. They cleared trees and sealed the perimeter. Excavators were brought in under military supervision. The site was treated as both a possible war crime scene and a high-risk archaeological dig. Live television crews arrived from across Europe. The treasure hunters declared they were about to unearth the find of the century. As the first machines broke into the earth and cameras rolled, the world held its breath. Something was buried beneath kilometer 65, and whatever it was, it had stayed hidden since the final days of the Third Reich. Science strikes back, no train. As weeks passed by, excavators continued to tear into the hillside under the belief that they were about to uncover one of the greatest lost treasures of World War II. But as the dirt came up, nothing appeared. There were no metals, no rails, no wood, and no tunnel, just layers of ordinary soil and compacted rock. Days passed and the hole got deeper, but they found nothing. Before the last excavator could even power down, the scientific community had already delivered its verdict. A team from AGH University of Science and Technology in Krakow had reviewed the radar data that started the frenzy. Their analysis was blunt. The anomaly was natural, not man-made. What looked like a train-shaped form was caused by mineral-rich soil, old strata shifts, and underground ice formations. It only resembled a train to those desperate to find one. In the end, the excavation confirmed it with finality. The site at kilometer 65 held nothing of value. The legend had hit bedrock. The reaction was swift and brutal. The same news networks that had once compared the site to Tutankhamun's tomb now turned on the treasure hunters. Headlines shifted from excitement to ridicule. Koper and Richter were called amateurs. Some labeled them opportunists. Others accused them of manufacturing hype for fame or profit. The Polish deputy minister, who once said he was certain a train existed, was forced to walk back his statement. Government agencies backed off and funding was pulled. Within days, the dig was abandoned and the site closed. The damage went beyond two men with a theory. The backlash against the 2015 gold train hunt cast a shadow over anyone who dared to investigate Nazi-era secrets. Researchers who had spent years studying the Riese tunnels suddenly found themselves dismissed as conspiracy chasers. Local officials grew wary of approving any future digs. The phrase Nazi gold train once again became a punchline in scientific circles, but the public did not forget. While experts pointed to geology, many remained unconvinced. If the anomaly was just rock and soil, why did the radar image look so exact? Why did it align perfectly with an old wartime railway line? Why had the area been restricted and sealed for decades after the war? The scientific explanation was clear, but the questions never really stopped. Even more unsettling was the fact that while the train may not have been there, the tunnels of Project Riese were still very real. They could be visited, explored, and measured. The search for the gold train may have ended in embarrassment. But the story beneath the mountains was far from over. The construction had come at a horrifying cost. The human cost beneath Riese. Behind the cold concrete walls of Project Riese lies a human tragedy so large and so brutal that it is difficult to comprehend. What the Nazis built beneath the Owl Mountains was not just a network of tunnels. It was a mass grave carved by the dying. To make Hitler's dream of an underground fortress a reality, the SS turned to one of the most horrifying resources of the war: forced labor from Nazi concentration camps. Between 1943 and 1945, at least 13,000 prisoners were dragged from subcamps tied to Gross Rosen, one of the most notorious concentration camp systems in occupied Poland. These were Jews, political prisoners, resistance fighters, and people considered undesirable by the Nazi regime. Many were Hungarian, Polish, Greek, or French. Others were simply rounded up during Nazi raids and transported without explanation. They were not given a choice. They were told they would work. They quickly learned they would not survive. The labor assigned to them was monstrous. These men were ordered to carve into hard gneiss rock, one of the most difficult stone formations to penetrate. They did not have modern machines or protective gear. They were given picks, shovels, and hand drills. Explosives were sometimes used, but prisoners were often made to clear the debris by hand. They were chained together, breathing in rock dust and explosive residue, while SS guards stood over them with rifles and whips. If someone slowed down, they were beaten. However, no digging beyond that was allowed, and authorities made it clear that any deeper excavation would require a full environmental and geological review, which could take years to approve. At first, their method sounded detailed and professional. They shared what they called terrain profiles and technical data, suggesting they had mapped out the exact coordinates of the supposed freight cars. But their credibility took a sharp hit when it was revealed that part of their methodology involved radiesthesia, a technique also known as dowsing. It is often used by treasure hunters, but it is not based on real science. There is no solid proof that it works, and most scientists say it is unreliable and untrustworthy. Experts see it as guesswork rather than a real method. Because of this, the moment the group admitted they were using radiesthesia, many people stopped taking them seriously. What seemed like a well-planned and scientific investigation suddenly looked more like a mix of hope and superstition. This caused many experts and officials to question whether the group had found anything real at all. Despite this, the group remained confident. They continued to suggest that what lay underground was not just a metallic anomaly, but a remnant of World War II that had never been recovered. However, archaeologists and engineers raised serious concerns about the safety of pursuing the claim. The area in question is located near the unfinished Nazi tunnel complex known as Project Riese. This underground labyrinth is riddled with unstable shafts, potential explosive remnants, and geological dangers. Digging too deep without proper safeguards could trigger a collapse or worse. As of now, the investigation has reached a standstill. The shallow scans have yielded no conclusive results. No excavation permit has been granted. The supposed wagons, if they exist at all, remain untouched beneath layers of earth and secrecy. Even so, the buzz has not faded. The group behind the claim continues to push for access, while historians and officials urge restraint. The renewed hunt has once again revealed how powerful the legend still is. For some, the gold train represents treasure waiting to be found. For others, it stands as a symbol of how dangerous obsession with the past can become. The story of the Nazi gold train is not the only legend that has survived from the chaos of World War II. It belongs to a long list of mysterious and terrifying treasure stories from the Third Reich. Echoes of other Nazi treasures. One of the most famous of these is the Amber Room. This was a massive chamber made entirely of amber panels, gold leaf, and mirrors, originally created in Prussia and later gifted to Russia. In 1941, the Nazis looted it during their invasion of the Soviet Union. It was last seen in 1944 in the city of Königsberg, which was heavily bombed near the end of the war. After that, it vanished. Some people believe it was destroyed in the bombing, but others claim it was secretly packed up and hidden. If someone collapsed, they were dragged away or shot. Conditions in the labor camps surrounding Riese were beyond inhumane. Prisoners were fed starvation rations, a piece of bread, watery soup, sometimes nothing at all. Diseases spread quickly. Typhus and dysentery ran through the barracks. Sick men were not treated. They were left to die or were removed by guards and executed outside the camp fences. At night, they were forced to sleep on wooden planks or bare floors. They were packed together in freezing cold without blankets. Those who did attempt to flee were almost always captured within hours or days, often betrayed by villagers, caught by guard dogs, or tracked through the forest by SS search parties. The punishment for escape was immediate and cruel. In many cases, they were publicly executed in front of the other prisoners as a warning. Some were tortured before death. Others were hung and left on display, their bodies used as a message to others thinking of doing the same. Occasionally, escapees were forced to dig their own graves. The SS wanted fear to spread faster than hope. A single escape attempt often led to collective punishment. Entire work groups or barracks would be beaten, starved, or even executed in retaliation. Only a handful of escape attempts ever succeeded, and those survivors later testified to the horrors of the Riese camps. Their testimonies remain some of the few first-hand accounts we have today of what really happened underground. It is estimated that at least 5,000 men died during the construction of Project Riese. Corpses were often piled up like trash near tunnel entrances, to be buried later in shallow pits. As men died, trucks brought more in to replace them. Survivors who lived long enough to speak about it called it a kingdom of death. What makes the suffering even more devastating is the fact that Project Riese was never finished. All that pain, all that labor, all that death for a vision that was never realized. This truth makes what happened in 2025 even more disturbing. When new claims about hidden trains surfaced again, they did not just stir curiosity, they disturbed a grave that had never been given peace. The resurfaced hunt for the gold train. In the summer of 2025, the legend of the Nazi gold train returned to life once again, this time reignited by a determined group calling itself Gold Train 2025. This team of amateur researchers claimed they had identified a new location far from the original frenzy of 2015. Their discovery, they said, was not just a tunnel or a shape underground, but something far more specific. According to their findings, there were 3 freight wagons buried deep beneath an old forest in the Valbjik region. Unlike earlier attempts that focused on the infamous Zone 65, this group insisted they had found a sealed wartime railway tunnel that had somehow escaped previous searches. What set their announcement apart was that it came with official documentation. Gold Train 2025 filed a request with the local authorities to investigate the site. In response, they were granted permission to conduct limited surface-level work. This included using metal detectors and performing shallow ground tests to a maximum depth of 50 centimeters. Over the decades, fragments have reportedly surfaced in different places. One theory even suggests that parts of it were smuggled west and could have ended up in underground complexes like Riese, the very site connected to the gold train. Another chilling site is Lake Toplitz in Austria. This deep alpine lake became a Nazi dumping ground during the final days of the war. When divers searched the lake, they discovered wooden crates filled with fake British banknotes. These were part of Operation Bernhard, a Nazi plan to collapse the British economy by flooding it with counterfeit money. Along with the banknotes, the divers also found weapons and unexploded mines. But they did not find any gold. That missing gold has fueled rumors for decades that more crates remain buried at the bottom, waiting to be found. Every few years, new expeditions are launched, but the truth remains out of reach. In 1945, the United States military made one of the most confirmed and shocking discoveries of the war inside the Merkers salt mine in Germany. Deep within the mine, they found a treasure hoard beyond imagination. There were piles of gold bars, stacks of foreign currency, and priceless stolen artworks. It was clear proof that the Nazis had tried to hide their wealth before the Allies arrived. That discovery changed how historians looked at Nazi treasure stories. If a haul like that could exist, then it became very possible that more were hidden elsewhere, including in Poland. These cases all lead to one conclusion. Nazi treasure stories are not random conspiracy theories. They are built on real events, real thefts, and real attempts to bury what was stolen. But these true stories have also been mixed with rumor and fantasy. The gold train exists somewhere between those two extremes. There is no doubt that the Nazis moved huge amounts of gold, art, and weapons near the end of the war. There is also no doubt that some of it has never been found. That is why people still believe. This brings us to the most important question. Why does this story still live on? Why the myth refuses to die. The gold train legend endures not only because of speculation, but because it has become part of local life. After the frenzy of 2015, Leipzig experienced an immediate surge in tourism, with visitor numbers rising by almost half. Hotels filled, new tour businesses appeared, and souvenir shops stocked books, trinkets, and postcards tied to the mystery. The myth itself turned into a kind of treasure, fueling an economy built on curiosity. The physical remains of Project Riese add to the attraction. In Osofka and Włodarz, sections of the tunnels are open to the public. Visitors can walk through endless corridors that stretch for kilometers, many of them unfinished and collapsing into dead ends. Some chambers are half flooded, forcing tourists to cross on small boats through dark underground lakes. In Osofka, towering concrete monoliths and strange hydraulic systems stand without explanation, remnants of a plan whose purpose was never revealed. The atmosphere in these tunnels is not like a normal museum. The silence is heavy, broken only by the sound of dripping water. The air feels stale and close, pressing down as if the mountain itself holds its breath. Guides often lower their voices, suggesting what could have been built had the war not ended when it did. Visitors leave with more questions than answers, and those questions keep the legend alive. The truth may never be uncovered. There may never be a train. Yet the myth will not die, because the tunnels themselves are real, and they carry the weight of secrets that were never meant to be revealed. What do you think about the Nazi gold train? Comment down below.